there, my name is Kelly Dale with Off the Beaded Path Beadstore.com. I'm glad you joined me today because in today's video, I'm going to be showing you a new stitch or technique. A few weeks ago, when my friend Edie Chandler sent me down the rabbit hole of the new way to start brick stitch, which I did a video on previously, I got to noticing that there was a stitch that I have never done before, and that was tubular brick stitch. So of course, then that sent me down another rabbit hole, because the more I looked at the finished piece of tubular brick stitch, the more I realized that it looks just like bead crochet. So I thought, why could I not take a bead crochet pattern and do the same thing with the brick stitch? So, of course, I did some more research and I found an artist, a bead artist in Las Vegas, who had asked that same question, and she actually had a project come out in Bead and Button in 2018. But since then, I have not been able to see any place online that's really pushed this as a technique, which I think is wonderful. So I went on a trip with some of my really close beading friends that I'm blessed to have in my lives. We went a couple of weeks ago and I taught them, we are calling it's faux crochet, but we're calling it faux crow for short. We're calling it faux crow. So doing a faux crow, what it is we are going to be doing a tubular brick stitch that is going to look just like you have either crocheted it or you have kumihimoed the piece. So this is going to be a multi-video series. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to make a basic faux crochet or faux crow project. I'm going to be making a necklace or a bracelet. I actually have a bracelet on here that you can see, and I actually have this really pretty purple necklace ready to go so that I can show you how to put the ends on. But it's just going to be basic today because I'm always getting questions about really good necklaces that are quick to work up that you can use, and this is definitely one of those. It's going to be a really, really quick piece to stitch up. Now we're going to be using size 8 seed beads today. The size 8 seed beads will work up really quickly. I can finish the bracelet in no time flat. So we're going to be doing size 8 seed beads in one color today. Now in the next video that I do, I'm going to be showing you how to use a crochet pattern to make a bracelet that actually will have designs on it. So this is the one that I'm going to be using in my video next week, hopefully, that will have the design. And I'm going to show you how to take just about any little crochet pattern that you find online and follow that pattern in the tubular brick stitch. So I hope that you will learn something new about this new tubular brick stitch. So let's talk about thread. So when you're learning faux crochet, your biggest issue is thread. There's so many threads on the market right now, and we are all used to using our certain favorite threads. But here's a little tip for you. Myself, I am a very, very tight stitcher. So when I'm doing faux crochet, I can't use some of my favorite threads. I can't use the dragon thread, the wildfire, or fireline. If you are a tight stitcher and you use one of these products, what's going to happen is as you stitch, your piece is going to remain so tight that you're not going to be able to bend it and it be flexible like you want it to be. It's not going to be this. It's going to be super, super, super stiff, and you're going to be so frustrated. So for very tight stitchers like me, you're going to need to use a KO thread or a 1G or a Miyuki thread, Nymo, whatever floats your boat. I like the KO and the 1G just because it comes in so many different colors. You can really pick a color that's going to go great with your beads. Now flip that for my friends who are very, very, very loose beaders. You may find if you use a thread like this that it's going to be too loose for you. So you might actually want to consider bumping up and using one of the threads that are similar to this, like your dragon thread, your wildfire, or your fireline. Whichever thread you choose to use, as you start the stitch, you're pretty much going to be able to tell fairly quickly if you need to switch out your thread or not. Because if your little tube is super tight, then you're going to want to switch to a different type of thread or really loosen up on your stitch. So that is tip 1. So let's talk beads. The beads that you are going to be using for today's project are size 8 seed beads. My favorite to use, as I have tested and played and kind of worked with this stitch, are Toho brand seed beads. Although I found that they're my favorite, that doesn't mean that you can't use other brands. For instance, for today's video, I'm stepping out of my box and I'm going to do a red bracelet, and they are my Yuki brand. It's just, I really like how the Tohos fit together a little bit better to me than the Mayuki brands. Now, you can also use any size bead. I suggest when you're learning this that you use size 8 seed beads because it's going to give you a nice tube that's not going to be super big. You can see there it's not huge. So it's going to give you a nice size tube and it's going to work up fairly quickly. If you use a size 11 seed bead or a size 6 or whatever, it's going to change the diameter of your tube and it's going to change the time that it takes. So if you use size 11 seed beads, you're going to end up with a smaller tube, but it's also going to be harder to see those thread bridges, and it's going to take you like quadruple the time it will for then if you use size 8 seed beads. For next week's project, again, I'm going to be using size 8 seed beads, but we are going to be using several more colors, so it's a little bit different. So get your beads together, get your thread together, and I'm going to use a size 12 beading needle, and let's get started. So here's an up-close look at today's project we're going to work on. One thing I want you to notice is that with a darker bead, darker thread looks really good with it, especially when we get to the end and I show you how to finish off your ends without using any type of cap or anything. This dark thread works really, really well for your darker colored beads. Now, I used a white thread. This is the Duracoat Galvanized Champagne, and I used a white thread, and you can see it blends fairly well into the bracelet itself, but when you get to the end, you see the thread where we will do our ladder stitch. So you will see the thread if you use a lighter color bead. The best thing to do is try to use a thread that is going to go good with your beads. So today I'm going to be using the KO thread in this red, since I'm using red seed beads to start. So I'm going to start with a ladder stitch. So I'm going to pick up 2 beads. And I'm going to bring these beads all the way down. Now, I want to leave about an 8-inch tail thread because I'm going to go back and add my clasp at the end. And I'm going to take the needle and I'm going to pass back up through the first bead again. So this is my first bead. So when I say pass back up, I'm not coming down. I'm coming up through that one bead. And I'm going to hold on to the bead to keep it in place, so that now my 2 beads sit side by side. So I want to come down through the second bead that I'm adding, and then I'm going to go ahead and reinforce this one more time. We're not going to do this for every stitch, just this base row so that it holds it nice and tight together for you. Okay, so there's my first 2 beads. Now I pick up 1, I want to make a circle, so I'm going to come back down through that same bead again to make a circle. And then I'm going to pass up through the bead that I just added. So I'm coming right up through the bead. Hold it in place. And I'm going to reinforce now. So I'm going to go down through the previous bead and then up through the bead I just added, so that I'm still in the same position I need to be. I'm just reinforcing it so I have a nice base to start out with. So I've got 3 beads here. I'm going to add 3 more. So here's 1, and I'm going to come back up through the same bead to make that circle. And then I'm going to come down through the new bead and reinforce. Pick up 1 bead. My thread's coming out of the bottom, so I'm going to come back around to make a circle. And then I'm going to come up through the new bead and reinforce. Okay, so you can see that's 5. So I've got to do it one more time. And if it gets loose, just kind of grab a hold and pull everything back tight. So I now have 6 beads in my circle. Not my circle, in my row. I have my starting thread here on this end, and then here is the beginning thread. I'm going to fold the 2 ends so that the last bead is close to the first bead. I'm going to take the needle, and at this point, I'm going to be working with my thread bridges. Your thread bridge is just your thread that connects the 2 beads. I'm going to take the working needle, and I'm going to come under the thread bridge between the first and the second bead. So this is my tail thread. This is my working thread over here, and I have the needle passing under the thread bridge between the first and the second bead. And I'm going to hold this little strip and pull this almost all the way through. I'm going to take the needle and I'm going to pass up through the last bead again. So one more time, this was my last bead. You can see my working thread is going under the thread bridge between the first and second bead. And now I'm taking the needle and I'm coming right up through the last bead again. This is the bead that my tail or my working thread is exiting, so that when I come back up through the bead, now my last bead, which is bead 6, sits atop centered between beads 1 and 2. So I'm going to take my needle off. I'm going to pull this out. I'm going to show it to you one more time. So again, working thread coming out of bead number 6, short tail thread coming out of bead number 1. We fold it in half, or fold it together a little bit, and I take the working thread, I pass under the thread bridge between beads 1 and 2. I pull it, but I do not pull it all the way through yet so that I can still see, because now I'm going to take the needle and pass up through bead number 6 again. So bead number 6 is the one that my working thread is coming out of. So I pass through that bead so that when I pull this now, make sure your thread doesn't get caught. When I pull this, now you'll see bead number 6 sits above beads 1 and 2 right here. It sits centered right above them. So from this point on, the fantastic thing is there are no step-ups, nothing special you have to do. All we have to do is pick up 1 bead, go under the very next thread bridge, which is going to be this one right here, pull it through, and go up through the bead that you just added, just like in normal brick stitch. So you see there, now I have beads 6 and my bead 7 laying side by side. Pick up one bead, come under the next thread bridge, and pass up through the bead you just added. Now, when I taught this to my group, there were 9 ladies that I taught this to. The biggest question I got from them is, when you add your bead, do you go under the thread bridge this way or do you go under this way? Personally, for myself, I like to come from the inside of the tube to the outside of the tube, so that way it's easier for me just to go straight up through the bead. You've got to do what you feel works best for you, but that's just, to me, the easiest thing to do. Pick up a bead, go under the next thread bridge, and then up through the bead that you just added. So as you start your piece, when you look down on the tube now, I should see 1, 2, 3, 4 beads here on the top, and I should see just a 5th one kind of peeking out between these 2 beads. Also, on the very bottom where our tail thread is exiting, these first 2 beads here, this is the one that our thread bridges went under, it's going to want to stick out a little bit like that. Don't worry, because when we get ready to finish out your tube, we'll actually finish that. So don't worry if it kind of sticks out and everything else is making a tube. So I'm just going to keep going. Your biggest thing is, like I said, as you look down, you should see those 4 beads there along the top. If you do not see 4 holes here, then this means you have either missed a thread bridge or you have done something wrong. And all you need to do is take your needle off and pull out until you find your mistake. Now, if you are getting close, because sometimes in the tube, you can't tell, which thread bridge you're supposed to go under. So if you'll kind of pull the last bead up, you'll be able to see I went under this thread bridge right here. So then this is the thread bridge I have to go under. So I'm going to pull that back tight and then come under that next bead. But like I said, sometimes you're going to get to a point and some of those thread bridges are going to look kind of close, and you're going to worry that you've don't know, or you're not going under the right one. So that's where I would suggest you just pick up the last bead that you added so that you can tell, and just keep going just exactly like there's nothing special. Again, no step ups, no anything that you have to do. Just keep adding a bead and going under the next thread bridge, and as you do that, you'll notice that you just keep spiraling around and around and around in your tube. So I'm going to work a little bit and get a little bit more tube made so I can show you, if it gets tight, what to do. All right, so I've worked for just a few minutes and I have a little over 1 inch done. But I wanted to show you, at this point, you should be able to have a flexible piece. If you cannot bend your piece, you need to make sure that you either change your thread or you really loosen up on your tension. And when I say loosen up on your tension, for me, when I thread on my bead, the way that I make sure I am loose on the tension is when I pull, I just pull it through like this. I don't pull it really tight like I normally would. So that way, once I actually put the bead on and then pull the thread, again, I'm not pulling it tight. I'm just pulling it to pull any excess thread out. So again, when you've got about 1 inch, 1.5 inches, you should be able to do this. If not, change your working thread or change your tension. So I've been stitching and I have a few inches stitched here, and you'll notice that I'm running out of my working thread. So I've taken the needle off of the working thread and I have myself a new piece of thread already cut. And I'm going to thread the needle with just a few inches of the thread. Here at the end, where the working thread is, I'm going to leave that thread for now, and I'm going to take the needle and I'm going to pass down through several beads of where I am coming out. So my working thread is coming outward and my needle is going to be passing downward through that bead. Now I'm only going to pull a few inches through, and for now I'm just going to take the new thread and the old thread and wrap it around my finger. We want to lock this thread in place, so I'm going to come to the bead right next to where my thread's coming out. Doesn't matter if I go left or right, but I'm going to go through one bead, and you'll want to be careful not to get the thread caught on another bead. So I'm coming up through that bead, and then I'm going to go down through a couple of beads here. And again, just make sure you don't get the thread caught. Again, I'll go up through a bead right next to where my thread is exiting, and then I'll come down through a few beads here. And then up through a bead and down through a few beads. Just like that. And again, just be careful, especially if you're using a same color thread like I am, just be careful that it doesn't get caught. And then once I feel like that thread is secure, I'll go through and I'll try to use up just a little bit more of the thread. And then I'll take the needle off. So I can tug this as long as this little short thread doesn't get any shorter, then I know I'm good to go. So instead of taking my scissors and cutting that, I'm going to go ahead and thread the needle onto the shorter thread that I had. And then I'm going to pass down through a few beads and lock this thread in place. By, just not cutting that other thread right now, basically what I'm doing is I'm just saving myself just a little bit of, having to pick up needle or pick up scissors, cut, pick up scissors, cut. I'm just saving myself a little time. But I'm going to lock this thread in place the same way that I did the other thread. And then once I'm satisfied with it, I'll take the scissors and I'll cut both of those threads at the same time. And then my new working thread is already in place for me to continue stitching. I wanted to show you now how to finish off the ends with these bullet ends. So these are called an 8mm bullet end cap. So what that 8mm means is that the diameter on the inside is 8mm. So when you put this in here, it is absolutely the perfect size that you need for the finding. So on the end here where I am stitching, I'm going to come out of the last bead, and then I'm just going to go down through the bead next to it and the one right below it. And then I'm going to come up through the two beads right next to it. So I'm coming out of that bead again. This just secures those last two beads together. And then at this point, I can go through and I can start securing this thread just like I did to add or finish off thread. So I'm going to pass through, and again, be careful that you don't get any threads caught as you work there. And just get this taken care of. And then once you're happy with that, go ahead and trim off the thread. And then I'm going to put a needle on the other end, and I'm going to do the same thing on that other end so that I have both ends identical. At this point, you're going to want to use your E6000 glue. And I'm going to take, and in my little cap here, I'm going to put a good little dollop, a dollop of Daisy. Nope, this is a dollop of our E6000. The reason I use the E6000, this is a nice flexible glue that's going to hold this really well. So I'm going to push this all the way in, just like this, I'm going to give it a good little twist to just get the glue in between the beads there at the end. I'm going to make sure it's straight, and then I'm going to set this to the side, and I'm going to do the same thing on this side, and I'm going to let this dry for 24 hours so I get the maximum adhesion to my piece. Once your piece is dry, then you can attach whatever type clasp you want. I'm using one of these really pretty pewter organic toggles is what I'm using here, and I've used a mixture of oval and round toggles. The reason I've used the mixture is because ovals are my favorite, but because of the size of this loop right here, the ovals don't fit it well. So I've used that. You can also use split rings or whatever you want to attach your clasp. So that way you can use a finish similar to this, or I'm going to show you now how to attach it if this just looks too big and bulky to you. Now, when I'm ready to add a clasp without using a cap, I'm going to need a clasp. Today, I'm going to be using a 15 by 10 round magnetic closure. I am going to need a few size 11 seed beads, and then I'm going to need 2 4mm rounds. Your bead can be a complete round like this, like a pearl or a druck, or it can be fire polish. I don't suggest bicones because they can cut the thread, especially when we're using it for the clasp. So I'm coming out here on the end that I am working on. This is not my starter end. And just like the other piece, I'm going to come down through the 2 beads next to where I'm coming out, and then right back up through 2 beads. So that way that secures that really, really well. So if I look straight down, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 beads. So I'm going to pick up 1 11/0, 1 4mm, and 1 11/0. My thread is coming out right here, so I'm going to come opposite directly across, and I'm going to come down through that 1 bead. So it's going to lay like this. So now I'm going to turn, and I'm going to come up through the bead right next to where my thread is coming out and pick up 111, and I'm going to go through the 4mm bead. So now when I hold and pull this, you'll see I've got 2 11s on this side. So I'm going to flip and pick up 111, and then I'm going to take and pass the needle down through the only open spot I have left here, which is this size 8 seed bead. So now when I do that, the bead right now will not sit perfectly straight. It's going to kind of sit down in an angle because that's the way our beads are, and that's perfectly fine. But you can see I have 2 11s on this side and 2 11s on this side with my 4mm here. So I'm going to pass back up through to come out of the 4mm. I'm going to thread on 3 11s, the first part of my clasp, and 3 11s. Now, you can also use a wire protector if you want to. That is completely up to you. You can make just a loop of beads here and attach with a jump ring. It's however you want to do it. This is just how I really like this to look. So my thread is coming out of the 4mm, so I'm going to come back through that bead again so that it makes a circle. I'm going to pass through, and right now I'm only going to reinforce this one time. You'll see why here in a minute. So I'm going to reinforce this, and I'm going to go through that, or nope, I'm just going to reinforce it, and I'm going to come out right here. I'm going to thread on 111, and with my thread right here, I can come down through the 11 on the right or the 11 on the left. It does not matter. I'm just going to pick one. So I'm going to go down through the 11 and then the 8 right under it. And then I'm going to pass up through the 8 and the 11 next to it. And then I'm going to thread on 111, and I'm going to skip the 11 I added just a second ago, and I'm going to go up through the 3 11s. So now when I pull that, that looks really nice. So I go through the 3 11s, the clasp, and 3 11s. And I'm going to kind of flip it to this side now. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to pick up 111 and go down through an 11 and an 8. I'm going to come up through an 8 and 11. And I'm going to thread on an 11 and pass up through my 3 11s, my clasp, and my 3 11s. And so as I do this, now I can go through and I can reinforce this really well. So that way I'm very confident that the thread won't break on me. And I can continue to pass through these beads as many times as I can get the needle through those beads. And it just gives you a really nice finish to the end of your thread, or the end of your piece, I should say. End of your thread too. Now, if you'd like, you can throw some half-hitch knots in here as you work. There's one. And I'm going to come up on the other side. And I'll throw another one in here. And then I'm going to pass down through my beads, and just like I've done all my other threads, I'm going to lock this thread into place before I cut it. And once I'm happy with it, then I'm going to trim this thread. Now I have my needle on the starting end. So remember, the starting end, this one actually has, if I look here on the top, it looks like it has 5 beads because this bead is not completely connected. So we started out is the exact same way. I'm going to go down through 2 beads, and then I'm going to come back up these 2 beads. And when I do that, you see now it pulls this more together, and I have those 4 beads on the top. So then I can pick up my 11, my 4, and my 11, and I come directly across and come down through, up through, pick up an 11 and go through the 4 millimeter, pick up an 11 and go through the 8, the only open 8 that I have left. If you want to, you can kind of come down and up as well. And I'm going to come through that 4 millimeter, and then it's 3 11s, my clasp, and 3 11s, come back through the 4 millimeter. I can pop this apart now if I want to. And then I'm going to reinforce it. Come down through the other side, and then pop in my 11s. So it's an 11, and I go down through an 11 and an 8. And then come up through an 8 and 11. Put in another 11, and I go through 3 11s, my clasp, and 3 11s. Thread on an 11 and go down through an 11 and an 8. Again, it does not matter if I go to the one to the right or to the left. And then I'm going to come up through an 11 or 8 and an 11. Thread on an 11 and go through 3 11s, the clasp, and 3 11s. And I'm going to continue to reinforce and then tie off the thread for this side as well. So if you're making a bracelet, you can see what a beautiful ending to this project it is. I mean, it's absolutely gorgeous. So now you can see how easy that is to put on. And the great thing is that these stack so well together. Look at that. You cannot tell if this is crochet, kumihimo, any of that from this side. And it's got just such a beautiful ending on this side. So it's a great project to try and make. And again, make it longer into a necklace. So friends, I hope you enjoyed learning how to make the faux crochet or faux crow bracelets. They are so fun to do, and like I said, you can make it a little longer for the necklace. Now keep this project in mind, because not next week, but I believe in 2 weeks after this video comes out, I'm going to be teaching you how to make a beautiful pendant, and this will be a great necklace for that pendant. So come back next week when I'm going to be showing you how to use this same stitch to follow a crochet pattern to be able to make a project that has a pattern to it. So it's going to be a lot of fun to learn how to do. I do have the step-by-step pattern available on my website at offthebeadedpathbeadstore.com. That pattern actually will include 2 patterns. It will include the pattern for today, which is your basic faux crochet, and then it will have a pattern that follows this exact project so that you can also make this bracelet if you would like. So I do have that pattern available, and next week I will have kits available for this bracelet in several different colors that you will be able to follow with that project. So I hope you guys have a wonderful week. If you try faux crochet, please send me an email. I'll put my email address down in the description box below. Send me an email with a picture of your faux crochet, or if you are on our Facebook group, Off the Beaded Path, I would love to see pictures of the faux crochet that you guys do. I hope you guys have a wonderful week. Be kind, and we'll see you again. Bye-bye.